You may have heard the story of these anti-God scientists who went to God and said, "We don't need you anymore. We figured it all out." God, they said, "Okay," God says. And they said, "Well, yes, we're going to challenge you. We're going to challenge you to a contest, and we can be able to make anything that you make." He says, "Okay. Well, I'm going to have us make a human being." They said, "No problem." And he says, "We're going to do it the old-fashioned way, using clay." Scientists looked at each other and said, "Oh yeah, no problem." So they went and picked up some clay from the ground and said, God said, "What are you doing? Get your own clay." Right? Right? Because God created from nothing, which no one can do. We can put things together, we can rearrange molecules and all that stuff, but no one but God can create from nothing, from absolutely nothing. And God creates from nothing. Not kind of nothing, not sort of nothing, but from there was nothing there, now there is something there. And the good news is that God is constantly creating us. We have our very being because God is creating us in this moment. At this very instant, we are being created, recreated again and again, over and over, constantly, because God's revelation to Moses, remember, was, "I am who am." I am being itself. It is the ground of being. And here's what the good news means. It means that your existence is proof. Your existence is proof that you are desired, that you are wanted, that you are loved. Because you are loved into existence in this moment. It's not that God created us once and then watched us go, but He is constantly creating us in this moment, loving us into existence in this moment. Why am I bringing any of this up? What does this have to do with any of the readings whatsoever? Anybody figured it out yet? No, you haven't. Okay, let me tie it in then. Jesus says to us today, "Without me, you can do nothing." I remember reading about one bishop who went and did a deep study on the Greek word that's used in the Gospel of John here for nothing, and what that means. And he looked up all the history of the word and how it was used in different literature, how it was used throughout the scriptures, and the different contexts and all that stuff. And he said, "I came to a conclusion that nothing really means nothing." Crazy. Amazing that we have to do that type of research to figure out that nothing means nothing. Without me, you can do nothing. Why? Because in every moment, we are being loved into existence by God. That's what I think one of the meanings of that statement is. But it's also in the context of bearing fruit. It's using the image of the vine and the branches, and that this context is that about bearing fruit, that you must be connected to the vine in order to bear fruit. And so for us, we have to use that image and say, okay, if we're not still connected, if we're not purposely connected to Christ, nothing we do will bear fruit. Nothing we do will bear fruit. You see, God created everything and continues to create everything, loving it into existence. But only human beings and angels have free will to turn to God or turn away from God. Everything else, by its very nature, is doing God's will, is praising God by its very being and existence. But God created us for love. He wanted us to love him, which means we can choose not to be grafted to the vine. We can choose not to remain in him. We heard that over and over in the second reading in the gospel. Remain in me. Unless you remain in me, you will not bear fruit. All these things. You remain in me as a branch on the vine and all these things. So often he uses that image of remaining because he was telling the disciples, you can choose not to remain in me. And if you choose not to remain in me, then you're going to wither and you'll be cut off and you'll be thrown into the fire. But if you remain in me, you will bear fruit. You will bear fruit. And so a lot of times we can go through our lives spinning our wheels and saying, how come I don't seem to be getting anywhere? A lot of times we can be trying to do things on our own, trying to be in control of our lives instead of saying, I need to get close to the heart of God. And then when we're close to the heart of God, he'll lead us into ways where we bear fruit, where we don't even recognize it, where we don't even know it. Some of you may know that I'm the chairman for the International Fraternity of Priests Board. And that means that I have to write an article every month for their newsletter, which, in case you didn't know, your pastor is internationally published. Wow, yeah, for the 120 people that actually get the newsletter all throughout the world, or whatever, it's closer to 300, but still. This is a great responsibility and not a great honor. But anyways, so I was rereading one of my articles that I wrote before I threw the newsletter away, because I want to make sure I read other guys' letters that write on the board. And I said, so what did I write about this month? And it was for the March edition, and I meant I had to have written it in February sometime. And as I was reading through it, it was talking about this struggle throughout COVID, because I felt like I needed to be doing something. I needed to be doing more. Like, how do I reach out more? And everything that the Lord was telling me in prayer was, don't just do something, sit there. Spending time getting close to the heart of God. And so when I reread this article the other day, I was like, yeah, I need to remember that. I wrote some good words there. That's pretty good. I need to bring that to heart. That at the core of who we are is meant to get close to the heart of God. And then if we're supposed to have action, he'll share with us. He'll lead us. He'll draw us into whatever that action may be. But too often what happens is we go out trying to do all this stuff, trying to bear fruit, and we end up with nothing. Because apart from him, we can do nothing. We can bear no fruit. I think about twice in the scriptures. Once in the Gospel of Luke, just as Jesus was calling Peter, and then once in the Gospel of John, after Jesus had been raised from the dead, and then he was calling Peter a second time. Peter is out and has a worthless night fishing, catching absolutely nothing, right? And then in the Luke account, Jesus says he's in the boat with him and says, throw the net down in the deep, and he does, and it's sinking the boats and the nets are tearing. In the John account, in the after the resurrection account, Jesus is on shore and he says, just throw it to the right side. And they throw it down, and then they catch 153 large fish. That they worked and they bore nothing. But as soon as Jesus spoke and they obeyed, the catch was miraculous. catch was miraculous. And so Jesus is inviting us today to remain in him, to get close to his heart. So often we can spin our wheels doing worthless and useless things in our lives. And Jesus says, get close to me. And in being close to me, remaining in me, then you will bear much fruit.